Welcome to this episode of Meet the Experts. Today, we're fortunate to have Amy Alexy, Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. She's joining us on the topic of strategic workforce planning. Amy has an amazing and diverse career spanning continents and businesses, and I am so grateful, Amy, to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me today, Chris.
Amy, with your experience, I mean, it cuts across so many industries and the entire planet. Given all that experience and the complexity, how do you define or think of international strategic workforce planning and how you might have applied it?
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Royal Caribbean, if that's okay, because I think it is a great example of the sophistication needed when it comes to workforce planning and workforce planning around the globe when you work for a large global organization. So we divide our organization into two different parts. The first is our shipboard side of the house, which we have about 70,000 crew members that service over 60 ships around the world. In a variety of different capacities or different positions. We actually have crew members from over 120 different countries.
Wow.
That we employ on our ships. And so we run, when you think about a cruise line, it's I would say, the definition of complexity, because from an HR perspective, you're recruiting and sourcing for a hotel. So basically a hotel at sea. You have an entire marine/engineering organization that actually runs the vessels on a day-to-day basis. And you also have an entertainment organization. So you've got to provide that entertainment to your guests while you're at sea. And then we also have an entire shoreside operation that supports our shipboard organization. So just on a ship, as an example, you've got hundreds of different positions that you have to make sure stay staffed, all the way, including positions like physicians and nurses, as we're coming back into service from COVID. It's extremely complex, and every crew member has a different contract length. So when we think about workforce planning, as an example, it's probably the most complex workforce plan that I've ever been a part of in my history. And I've worked for financial companies, manufacturing organizations, pharmaceuticals, and now hospitality/entertainment. So we have to know at any point in time what our demand is and what our supply is. And every week or every day sometimes, we are managing the supply and the demand and working with the business, right? So from an HR perspective, we get the requirements from the business, and then we have to run those calculations, and we have to make the match talent to position. And if we don't have enough in the forecast, we have to go recruit and we have to go hire. So it's this cycle that really never stops in order to maintain the operations of the business. And then shoreside is probably a little bit more similar to what you would find at other organizations. So looking ahead, we call it our annual operating plan. So we're always looking ahead into the future to say, okay, what are the skills? What are the types of individuals that I need? And what options do I have? So we look at it really in terms of, do I buy talent? Do I build talent? Or do I borrow talent? And so borrowing talent, I think you're going to see more companies lean on that in the future too. So that's, do I hire an outsourcing company to provide that talent to me? Do I look at some type of an offshoring solution? And it's all based on time too, right? So you don't always have the opportunity to build talent. Sometimes you need it immediately, and it's easier to go buy that talent in some capacity. And that's what drives our early career programs. So our internship programs, that's what drives what we go recruit for out in the market. And then just to add one nuance to it is what I've seen recently is an intense focus on the challenges that every company is facing as we're dealing with the Great Resignation here in 2021. And so every company is facing this challenge. You've got organizations that are offering hybrid work environments, fully virtual work environments. And for those of us that live in South Florida, the real estate market actually then plays into another layer of complexities when it comes to workforce planning, because you aren't always able to recruit talent down to South Florida, given the cost increase in the real estate market. So all of those factors play into our, I would say, macro workforce plan.
That's such an amazing take on the complexity. It's more than just the people, but as you described, the buy, the build, the borrow, the economic circumstances in macro, the real estate circumstances, and then what's happening in the workforce. So thank you for that. When you think about the more senior level type of positions that you have in the industry, or the specialized, are those folks that you tend to look for from the United States and move them out, or bring them in from other countries, or more specific? How do you think about the key positions and the staffing approach you take for key positions?
So we're a global organization. So a lot of times I've had the opportunity to work for organizations that are global but based in the US. And I've had I actually worked for an organization that was global and based in Europe. And it's interesting to see just the different dynamics and how each organization evolves over time, because a lot of times, it's the headquarters, where the headquarters is at, that dictates the culture of the organization. When I tell people that this is a global organization, it really is the most global company I've ever worked for, given the diversity of employees and crew members that we have at our company. We take a couple different approaches, right? So when we look at talent, our goal is to find the best talent out there. When you look at where our major offices and operations are, they tend to be local individuals that are back in that operation that might have done like a tour, if you will, around the organization and the operation. So they would have spent time at our headquarters. I know a lot of companies require that of their up and coming talent, is that they do a headquarter tour. When I worked at Goodyear, that was one of the things that we liked to promote. At Royal Caribbean, you just have the opportunity to work around the world and work on ships and do all kinds of special projects. So you get that natural interaction, if you will. Same with our Australia operation. We have a local individual who's running on our Australia operation. When it came to building out our Asia operation, we did a combination of a local individual as well as somebody from headquarters. So you got that headquarter feel. We like to bring the best people into the organization, and then we like to develop them and really promote from within. I would say we have hired people externally from external into these higher level positions when we don't have strong successors. So that's one key component. And the other one is just, if you go back to the build, buy versus build category, if you don't have that capability, you need to go acquire it immediately. And that's what we've done during COVID, actually. So when you look at what organizations were facing in the pandemic, I think it actually shined a light on where there were opportunities to bolster internal capabilities, if you will. And so that was something that you saw us do as an organization. We added a chief medical officer to our organization. We added a new ESG officer to our organization. So, even during the pandemic, we recognized that we had a great opportunity to bolster capabilities, and those were the talents that we went and recruited externally to the organization.
So the buy, borrow, build isn't just for your entry level, your earlier career. You really take that approach for everything you do.
Absolutely. And I think more and more companies are going to go down that route if they haven't already, especially when you find yourselves in situations that it's just hard to recruit certain talent, right? And so sometimes it's just more advantageous to hire a company or hire contractors. There's a lot of freelancers. I remember probably 20 years ago getting a book on like the next class of workers. It was like the rise of the creative class. I know what the book was. It was the rise of the creative class is what this book was. And it was basically the notion that people were going to take their own careers into their hands. And you would see this proliferation of freelancers or contractors. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing these days. People have flexibility. They want more flexibility. And so they're their own gig workers.
Right. It seems like it's just changing so much faster than it might have a decade ago.
I know. It feels that way.
Wow. So, Amy, in your experience, what are the greatest opportunities and challenges in recruiting, selecting, and repatriating people to international assignments?
So it's the notion of international assignments is a fascinating topic because I think everybody thinks it's as glamorous. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like a great thing to have on your resume. It's a glamorous experience. And from somebody who's had 2 international assignments, I would just say for as much as wonderful as it is, there's also challenges that come with it. And I think helping people understand what those challenges are is absolutely critical to the success of an international assignment. So I do want to answer your question. I thought I would just tell a couple personal examples though first.
Great, thank you.
So my first international assignment, I was a few years out of school, and my boss, I was part of a merger and acquisition. We were running it, and my boss said, "You want to go to Europe?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Pack your suitcases. You're leaving on Monday." And I packed 3 suitcases and I moved over to France. Without a family, so I was young, I was naive, I was early in my career. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The only thing I could do was speak French, which that came in handy at the time. But I was in charge of a Western European customer service consolidation. And so I literally traveled by myself through Western Europe working on this project. And the challenges I faced at that point was I was lonely, right? So I didn't have a lot of friends. It was a totally new experience. I got lost on a number of occasions. And this was before cell phones, before you could, do Google Maps or translate anything on your phone. And you really, I found myself in a lot of situations that I had to get myself out of through a lot of, I would say, problem solving, and quite frankly, a lot of courage and flexibility. And I go back to problem solving, right? You had to just be creative in terms of how I was going to get back home when I was lost, quite frankly, right? So I also had the opportunity to move to Munich, Germany. This was 4 years ago. And I moved with my family. So I had a husband and 2 children at the time. So the challenges moving with a family were very, very different from when I moved by myself. So it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking care of those that were coming with me. So making sure that my kids found a good school and that they were settled, making sure that my husband had a good community that he could connect with, making sure that our house was in a safe environment, that we had, could walk places and had parks so that the kids, your house is very different sometimes from what you're used to in the US. And so we spend a lot of time outside of our house and a lot of time traveling and things like that. And so when I look for people to take international assignments, I think flexibility and problem solving is absolutely critical. I think people being empathetic and being open-minded is absolutely critical, right? Because it's not your way of doing things anymore. It's the necessity to adapt to another culture and be welcoming and open-minded to that. And the other thing is, what support system do people have when they accept an international assignment? And I don't care where you are in the world. If you don't, you need to have a good support system, because you find yourself in situations where it's extremely lonely, and you need people that can talk with you, something to look forward to sometimes, just a trip or a visit, or talking to a loved one is necessary. I was very fortunate that my husband was extremely supportive and my kids were young enough. But a lot of times international assignments, they don't work out because people are lacking the support system. And then on the repatriation side, it's from an HR perspective, having that open dialogue with the individual about when and what they want to do when they return is very, very important. A lot of international assignments don't work because when people come back, the company hasn't really done that workforce planning to think through what that individual is going to do. The other thing I've seen in previous organizations is that when you go to an international assignment, oftentimes your role is bigger, if you will, right? So it's a lot bigger from a breadth perspective in terms of your responsibilities. But when you come back to headquarters, that's not the case anymore. And so a lot of times people expect, I'm going to come in and go right back to the corner office that I had when I was on my international assignment. And a lot of times that's not the case. And so it's managing expectations in terms of, why is somebody taking the assignment in the first place? So what are the skills that we hope that that person gets from that experience? How does that translate for when they come back to their initial location so that we can utilize those skills and they've grown? So you're growing from not only a skill perspective, but also like emotionally too, right? Emotional intelligence, leadership, you're gaining a lot from that experience. How do we leverage that when you come back so that it wasn't just, 3 years or 2 years in another location?
Great. I really love the personal take you can bring to that conversation with your own experiences, as a single person, as a family person, and that description of the different skills and abilities and the traits and the role of the company in setting expectations. So this has been a great conversation on strategic workforce planning. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, knowing that you're speaking to folks who are earlier in their HR career, even looking to get into their HR career. If there's a piece of Amy Alexy advice that you give somebody who's, yeah, you're right, I know, here it comes. Didn't give me this question. What would you say to folks who are getting into the field now? And this will be the last question I'll ask you.
I would have a couple pieces of advice. So first is, I remember when I first started my career and you would ask somebody, why did you get into HR? And the answer was, oh, I like people. It's much less about that these days. You have to enjoy being with people. You have to build connections with others, right? Everybody has to do that. But HR has changed so much since I started my career, in that it is a business role first and a people role second. So I am the employee advocate, right? If I don't speak up, then the employee voice won't be heard. I'm not paid to give people a perspective. I'm not paid to tell people what they want to hear. I'm paid to tell people what they need to hear. So I am an employee advocate, but I have to know the business first. and I have to understand the business challenges, and I have to ensure that the HR team is thinking, way into the future, so that we're not caught by surprise, or we're not prepared to be able to deal with any number of factors, whether it's growth, expansion, or a reduction in services, which every company will face at some point in their cycle. And the other thing I would say is just be open-minded, right? So be open-minded about opportunities that come your way. Really explore the entire field. It's such a dynamic field to be in. There's so many areas to explore. If you have the opportunity to branch out into an area that might not be your strong suit, take it, because you'll have a different level of appreciation, I think, for the entirety of the function rather than just one particular area.
Amy, you have been so generous with your time. There is no more demanding job, maybe the CEO, than the chief HR officer. And this is a gift that you've given these students. And I really do appreciate it. And I know they do as well. So Amy, Alexy, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and look forward to catching up with you again.
Thanks so much, Chris.